So we're in Luke chapter 7. Jesus has moved on to Capernaum, the northern side of the Sea of Galilee. And in the town there's a centurion. This centurion is a Roman soldier who oversees, probably 180 to 100 soldiers. He's kind of a middle management type guy, probably pretty well off, has slaves. And one of his slaves or his servants is sick. He cares about this guy. Which is unusual for a Roman centurion to even care about his slaves, because slaves didn't really mean much to them at that time. But the unique thing about this guy, this centurion, is that he also is well connected with the Jews. And so he's got some Jewish elders, some friends of his, that he sends to Jesus for requests to heal his servant. What you see unfolding here is a centurion that's not what you would expect. He cares about his servants. He's got good connections with the Jews. The first thing that the Jews say when they come to see Jesus is, this man deserves to have you do this. For a Jew to say that a Roman deserves anything is a huge step. If you really want to understand the story, you have to understand the political culture and climate at the time. The Jews were an occupied country. In fact, they'd been an occupied country for a number of years. What the Romans did, they sent representatives to keep the peace. And this centurion, his job was to keep the peace. He did something that maybe was different. He developed a relationship with them. He loved them. He built their synagogue, and the elders, the Jewish elders, respected him enough that they were willing to represent him to Jesus and say, this man deserves to have you do this. That's the type of guy he is. And on top of that, he cares for this slave that he has. He heard about Jesus, heard some stories about Jesus, saw what he can do, and demonstrated faith that, hey, I'm going to send some people. I'm going to get some of the Jews that I know, and Jesus is going to make this right. Jesus doesn't ask any questions. He just says, I'm going to go. As Jesus is apt to do, he just heads right over. And then a second delegation on the way between where our story starts, and between that and the centurion's home, a second delegation shows up. And this delegation, also from the centurion, apparently he's heard that Jesus is on the way. He sends his second group and he says, don't bother coming. I don't deserve to have you under my roof. Again, something more about the centurion, just the humility that he shows. Many scholars think that the centurion is looking out for Jesus, because if Jesus, as a Jew, goes into a Gentile home, he's going to be defiled, become unclean. And I believe the centurion recognizes that, perhaps, and doesn't want to put Jesus in that situation. And so he's looking out for Jesus, but just also his humility. When we look at ourselves, it's like, do we have that kind of humility? And what you see here also is a depth of understanding who Jesus is that I don't even think the disciples realize. Because he goes on to say, but say the word and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes. I tell that one, come, and he comes. I say to this servant, do this, and he does it. And so this centurion recognizes authority. He lives under authority, but on top of that, he recognizes that Jesus is a man with authority. An authority at another level, a spiritual authority, that not only spiritual authority over spiritual forces, but over sickness. And just the faith that this guy demonstrates from the get-go on who Jesus is. When we pray, do we have that kind of recognition of who Jesus is and what he does? And Jesus sees this, and it says, when Jesus heard this, he was amazed at this man's faith. What does it take to amaze Jesus? There's only 2 times in scriptures where Jesus is amazed. Here, where he's amazed at the depth of this man's faith, and another place where he's amazed at the lack of faith of a whole town. And Jesus goes on to say, I have not found such great faith even in Israel. And I got to think the disciples are saying, we're right here, Jesus, you're talking about us. We have faith in you. And Jesus is saying, you don't have faith like this guy has. You may have followed me, but you don't really understand and trust me the level of this centurion. In John chapter 20, verse 29, just after Thomas says, I believe, my Lord and my God, Jesus says to him, you believe because you've seen me. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. And the centurion's one of those people who has not seen Jesus. He hasn't met Jesus, yet he believes, and he's blessed for that. And it puts us all in that same situation, because we have not seen Jesus. We're much more like the centurion. The centurion never met Jesus, but demonstrated a faith. And it's the same thing that we're asked to do as well. One of the cool things about this, also about the centurion, is just before in the message that Jesus just shared, one of the things he said to the crowd, and surely the disciples were there to hear it, is to love your enemies. When Jesus said to love your enemies, it's hard for us to think like that. And it's hard for us to wrap our brain around that. But if you understand this story, there's almost like Jesus, like a little side-eye toward the disciples, like, see, this is what I was talking about. This is the kind of guy that you ought to be like. He has faith in me and he loves people, and his enemies love him as well. It almost makes you like, who is the enemy here? Who are the enemies? And I'm sure like when Jesus said to the crowd and to the disciples, you need to love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, there was a sense of like, really? Who does that? And Luke, by putting this story right after that, is like saying, here is someone who does that. You think it can't be done? This guy has done it. And then the miracle happens. The delegation heads back. They found the servant well. It's one of only 2 miracles where Jesus does from a distance. Most of the miracles, Jesus is laying on hands or he heals someone who's right there. There's only 2 times in the Gospels where Jesus says the word and somebody from a distance is healed. Most of the miracles we ask for when we pray for someone at the altar, we're usually asking for miracles from a distance. It's kind of standard for us today, but it's very unique in the Gospels to see that. The miracle is almost an afterthought at the end. There's no like, and then Jesus said this and he was healed. There's no big fanfare. It's just what Jesus does. He heals people. He does miracles. But maybe the greater miracle in this is also the miracle of the centurion's faith. In many ways, when I think of this story, I think that's the bigger miracle. That this man who never met Jesus, who is a pagan, polytheistic background, believes in Jesus, sees the power within Jesus, believes that Jesus can do a miracle, doesn't have any doubts. That is a miracle. The faith of the centurion himself was truly miraculous.